every single figure following Kant is influenced by Kant in one way or another. That's just the reality of our intellectual milieu even today. I would say that even the questions I answer and ask are related to Kant, whether I like it or not, because Kant has formed the way that we think in the post-Enlightenment West more than just about anybody else. So this is true of Hegel's time. Now, Kant is at this point just growing in influence. And, Kant is a late Enlightenment figure who ends up really outshining all other Enlightenment figures in his impact. So Hegel also is German, of course, as is Kant. So he has an influence, particularly in the German Academy. Now, there are some main points in Kant and considerations of Kant that we need to think about with Hegel and see particular areas of influence from one thinker to the next. And the first point is the questions of freedom and reason that we see in Immanuel Kant. Now, with the rise of Newtonian physics, at this time, we are learning a lot more about the natural world. After Isaac Newton, people start to think that the world is governed by mechanical laws, just like a machine works. It's just one thing happens and another thing happens. And as human beings, perhaps we are just part of the machine. Now, if that's true in the ultimate sense, that means that we have no actual freedom. If we are just part of a machine, if we are just biological objects, and you see these debates still going on in philosophy of mind today, though, of course, we're not bound by Newtonian physics in the strict sense as they were at the time, because we understand a lot more about the natural world. But still, there is a strong mechanistic natural philosophy of mind that continues to exist today among some thinkers, people like Daniel Dennett, who you may be familiar with, or Paul and Patricia Churchland. But according to these thinkers, there is no such thing as human freedom. We essentially are machines. We're like robots. We just do what we do because of biological processes. There's nothing that we can do about it. And this, of course, has a profound impact upon humans, upon us, because what about values and meaning and how I live my life and how I make my daily decisions? It certainly impacts the way that I would look at myself if I say I'm just a purely biological machine and I have no freedom at all. All of that is just a mere illusion. So Kant seeks to explore this notion of freedom. And a lot of thinkers do at this time. British thinkers do in kind of a different sense, but we're talking in a more German sense. English thinkers tend to view freedom in terms of freedom from constraint. And we see those ideas played out in the American Revolution and in the American concept of liberty. So when we're talking about freedom in someone like Kant or Hegel, we're not really talking about liberty as in freedom from constraint. That would be another talk that I really do want to do on John Locke and exploring some of those notions of liberty. But for Kant, freedom, what is ultimately most free is what is most rational. So rationality, and this is typical of Enlightenment thought, rationality is really the highest value. And to be truly free is to be truly rational. So there is this one-to-one correlation of the rational with the free. So Kant wants to recapture this notion of freedom. He wants to move away from a purely mechanistic approach to the world where all we can say about ourselves is that we are mere machines. He wants to also affirm the reality of Newtonian physics, understanding of the natural world. But you can watch the Kant talk or listen to the Kant talk to get more details there. Okay, so Hegel is going to emphasize these two things as well. He has a high view of reason. In some ways, his whole philosophy is a philosophy of the development of reason. There's a saying that the rational is the real and the real is the rational, which I think characterizes Hegel's approach pretty well, as well as a lot of thinkers in this era. And he's also going to think a lot about human freedom and what it means to be truly free. And Hegel is going to take from Kant that to be truly free is to be truly rational. Okay, and so we're going to see also he develops this whole idea of this spirit or Geist, as he's going to call it, that underlies mechanical reality. So mechanical, natural, biological reality is not all there is. There is a reality of meaning and purpose underneath all of that. He is also going to take from Kant this distinction between subject and object that we talked about with Kant, with the Copernican revolution, as he describes it. That Kant is rethinking the relationship between subjects, as in human subjects, and objects, or the things that we encounter in everyday experience. The rethinking of how I relate to the world around me is going to influence Hegel profoundly, though he's going to go in different directions than Kant is, because he's going to really make the argument, and Kant does in some ways too, but just in a different way. He's going to make an argument that there isn't a strong divide between subjects and objects, that we are all really one in some deeper sense. Also, he gets from Kant this idea that we can speak about nations or people groups as subjects. So traditionally in philosophy, when we talk about a subject, you're thinking of yourself, right? You're thinking of an individual, especially in someone like Descartes. But in Kant, you start to see this shift where, and this is in his political philosophy, where Kant lays out what becomes the basis for the United Nations that we have today, where Kant starts to speak about nations themselves as subjects. So he's thinking of subjects more in a corporate sense than just in an individual sense. And that corporate understanding of subjects is going to profoundly influence Hegel.